Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, January 19th. Thanks so much for joining me. I've got a great crew on hand already. Let's see, Jeremiah Underwood is here. We got Jerry Stephenson, James Langford, Brian O'Sullivan's here, Mark Grenier, Sharon Ferrante, Cindy Guentherman, Sharon Ferrante again, sorry, Dee Coleman, Mary Picard, Dick Westheimer's here, Morgan Feeney, Gary Rawson, Sharon Ferrante again. Hey Sharon. I should look at the actual names before I read them. Tom Barlow, Katie Dozier here in the room next door. We've got Bethany Jarmel. We've got Nate Jacob is here, another poet. BC McSee, all looking good. Matt TC is here too. So a lot of folks over on YouTube. Do click the like button if you would. That really helps. Thanks, Dick, for suggesting people do that. Now, Facebook is delivering our videos to fewer and fewer people, and right now we have 3 viewers who are all still silent. That's it. That's how, I mean, really, Facebook used to really push the videos. Now they don't, to the point where I'm considering not streaming to Facebook. Is it really worth it? I'm not really sure. I mean, we do get a few hundred people over time once it's posted to our page, but like the notification things just don't bring people in like they used to. Anyway, if you show up on Facebook, do say hello. Now, as always, the critique of the week is the goal is to give that workshop experience, which is so valuable, letting people know, what strangers think about their poems, which is really hard to get. It's really hard, when you're showing poems to friends, people who know you well, to, fellow poets that you know well. There's so much bias and just background knowledge. There's so much that goes into that, and trying to, protect your feelings and things like that. We care about you here at the Critique of the Week, but, we care about the poems, on top of feelings too, maybe a little bit. We try to encourage everybody to improve and get better, and just be honest about everything. That's the goal. So leave as many comments as you can. Here we go. We've got some people over on Facebook now. Tara Meslik McMahon is here. Radislav Stoyanov is here. Good to see you too. So we got a couple people on Facebook. I'll be sure to flip over and share your comments there as well. Yeah, so Sharon Friend says Facebook always broke up, so I switched. Yeah, Facebook just, for a while, 4 years ago or so, they're really trying to compete with like YouTube and TikTok for videos. Now, if you look through Facebook videos, it's all just really weird, spammy type things that are trying to trick you into watching videos for as long as possible, because the conclusion that they baited you with is it takes like 5 minutes to get to. And, just a lot of garbage on Facebook, to be honest. But, I don't know. If people want to listen on Facebook, it's like one extra button for me. And you get some extra people that might not have seen it otherwise who like the Facebook app. Over on X, we also stream there. And I don't know how many people watch there. I mean, we have a few hundred people who watch eventually. But live, there's no way to share. So really, YouTube is the best place to be right now for streaming live for the Critique of the Week. Anyway, now we're going to do a quick run through the oldest poems in the queue, trying to keep as caught up as possible on the critique. But I thought I'd start with a little lesson, a little topic to talk about. We're going to piggyback on what we were talking about on the Poetry Space with KG Dozier this week. I think, let's see, Dick Westheimer's here. He was speaking on the space among some other people. And we were talking about poetic turns. And coincidentally, at the same time, we're trying to figure out the winners for this year's Neil Postman Award for Metaphor. So this week I have metaphor on my mind and turns on my mind. And I thought I'd take a look at 2 different ways poets turn into metaphor. I think that might be something interesting just to look at and highlight in some poems. So the first one, which made me think of doing this, was today's poem at rattle.com, Danusha Lamaris's The Visitor. And I think instead of having her read it, I'll read it so I can stop at the turn and talk a little bit about it as we go. But this is a great example of using extended metaphor in a poem and how you use a turn, which is sort of a sudden shift in perspective, in order to sort of dive into what the metaphor really means. And so you sort of there's sort of like a setup, and then you switch into what you're really talking about. And a lot of times when you write, that's how it works. Like you're sort of thinking about something, you don't know why It has this memory was called up, or what it means to you, why you're even writing about it. You just have this sort of feeling that there's something there. And then halfway through writing about it, just describing the details, it sort of occurs to you what the poem is actually about. I think that happens a lot in poems, and it's a great way to use extended metaphor in a poem. And so let's take a look at this poem, though. This is Danusha Lemaris's The Visitor. And, of course, you can look at Danusha Lemaris's Rattlecast. She was a guest on, around Rattlecast. I think it was the first year, in episodes. I think it might have been like episode 50 or so, or maybe 40, maybe, if I'm right. Or maybe it's a little later. It was in the spring of one of the years we did the Rattlecast, so somewhere back there. A great poet. Her Bonfire Opera, just a beautiful book. And it's a really great episode. And here is Danusha's, though, her poem for today. Oops, I don't want that screen view. Hang on a second. Let me switch the... We want this one. There we go. That's how it's supposed to show up. This is The Visitor by Danusha Lemaris. And I'll read it myself, even though there's audio, which you should go listen to if you can. I'll so I can go slowly through the poem first. This is The Visitor, and this is an example of a sudden movement. So you set up. Watch how she sets up the poem. What she's describing. She builds the scene, and then she has this transition, this quick turn, where she starts to tell you what the metaphor is actually for. Okay, and you can see how the poem sort of evolved by looking at this poem, The Visitor. You can get used to almost anything, like whatever it was that lived in my best friend's house when we were girls. You'd hear its steady tick, tick, tick up and down the stairs, feel it sweep past you in the darkened hall. And what about those nights we stayed up late talking in the living room? How we kept turning up the heat, but each time the dial slid back to its familiar chill. And so we set up the first two stanzas. We're talking about the structure. These first two stanzas set up the scene for the poem, which is this sort of haunting at the friend's house. We jump into the poem. We call it The Visitor, which is sort of a title that leads into what we're talking about. But you can get used to almost anything. We'll come back later and extend the metaphor sort of even further. But right now we don't really know what that is. We just know you can get used to anything. And then we start talking about this ghost. We're building this scene about the ghost. And so anyway, the story, a medic back from World War II, his apartment in the attic, which explains the time she woke and saw a grizzled countenance gazing down at her, a flashlight fixed on her face. And somehow, even after that, kept sleeping in her room, dreaming under her thick blankets, while he went on clodding down the hall, taking notes, checking beds. This is how it is to live with loss. And so there we have the turn. And all of a sudden, we have what the poem is actually about. We think the poem is about, and maybe even Danusha, as she was writing this poem, thought it was about the memory of this haunting. But then she realizes it's about something deeper. And that was the sort of the subconscious itch that was driving her to write the poem in the first place. And so we make that, we set up this scene, this memory, and then we dive into explaining what it's like by turning into it. So this is how it is to live with loss, the visitor that never leaves. And so the whole poem, so loss, having missed somebody, a loved one lost, is like a ghost haunting your house that you, as it says in the first line, you can get used to almost anything. You can get used to that loss. And so it's a beautiful sort of setup and then punchline into the turn. She then elaborates on it too. So this is how it is to live with loss, the visitor that never leaves. It walks through your house. It eats your bread, sleeps in an upstairs room. Sometimes you pass it in the kitchen, give each other a nod. More ordinary than terrible, except some nights when it wakes you, shines its full heft in your face, and what it was broken in you breaks again, though after your one half tells the other what it knows. Such sorrow means you have survived, have lived to bear its weight. So a beautiful poem, but you can see how the poem is structured. And if you're struggling with a poem, if you're writing on a subject, a memory comes up, you don't know what it's about, think of the ways you can turn, you can lean into it, you can do, have that kind of transition in perspective. And that's one way to do it, with this sort of a really, it's going in one direction and then bam, sudden shift. And that's how this poem works. Danusha Lemaris is The Visitor. And I was thinking about other poems too and how they might not have a turn. Because like I said, we were talking about turns on the Poetry Space. You can find that, just type the Poetry Space into any podcast platform. You can watch that hour with Katie Dozier and I and other friends talking about at Poetic Concept every week. And it was fun talking about turns and looking at the ways they work and how even in things like, Shakespearean sonnets, we found multiple turns, which is interesting too. You'd think the volta might be the only one, but it's really not. So that was a fun episode. And that's one type of way to use extended metaphor, to set it up and then turn into it. But now let's look at another version of an extended metaphor poem. This is one of my favorite poems. I'd like to pull something not from Rattle, and so I was thinking about this. This is The Niagara River by Kay Ryan. And it's really one of my favorite poems. Such a beautiful little poem, as Kay Ryan tends to write short poems. And so this is going to be extended metaphor too. But notice here how she doesn't turn. She sort of gradually builds into it, so you're slowly realizing, it's slowly being revealed line by line what the poem's actually about. It's a very different feel, even though it's both an extended metaphor poem in both cases. So this is the Niagara River. And I was thinking about reading this on the Poetry Space, which is why I was thinking about this poem yesterday too, because it's an example of a non-turning turn, and I think the conclusion that we came to talking about it is that poems sort of have to have a sense of movement. And there's different ways you can have movement. There's sort of different kind of cuts and different kind of, but the thing is that a poem is really a kind of magic spell that's transformative. It takes you from one state to another. And to do that, you have to have a sense of movement of some kind. And so you can sort of have a dissolve fade type thing. You can have a sudden turn. You can have a poem like this, the Niagara River, that gradually turns, like sort of a ship, no pun intended, given the topic, turning slowly in the same way, but eventually going in a different direction than it started with. And there's always that kind of sense of turn because it has to take you from one place to another. And that's the only way a poem can be transformative, is if it moves. So let's take a look at the Niagara River really quick. The Niagara River. As though the river were a floor, we position our tables and chairs upon it, eat and have conversation. As it moves along, we notice, as calmly as though dining room paintings were being replaced, the changing scenes along the shore. We do know this is the Niagara River, but it is hard to remember what that means. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful poem here, where the Niagara River is an extended metaphor for life itself. Our life is like this journey on the Niagara River, where we're all sitting here enjoying the scenes, watching the view as if it's just changing paintings, even though we know in the back of our minds that the massive waterfall is coming up at the end of this river, and yet we pretend that it's not. But notice how there's no turn. Like we sort of know right from the start, the Niagara River, as though the river were a floor. So we're just describing and slowly, gradually turning into this metaphor, into making the meaning out of the poem. As though the river were a floor, we position our table and chairs upon it, eat and have conversation. And so right now, the poem, you get the feeling that it's about more than just the river, but you can also imagine it just being about the river. Like that's how gradual this turn is, even in a short poem. Which is really fascinating. As it moves along, we notice as calmly as though dining room paintings were being replaced, the changing scenes along the shore. So you can really imagine this, but because it's like that idea of dining room paintings being slowly replaced, there's a sort of magical quality that's building up, and you sort of get the sense more and more that it's a metaphor. And so you start to feel that more and more throughout here. And then we do know this is the Niagara River. I love that repetition too. We do know. And the way she breaks it, she does this a lot. She has a lot of poems too that are formal metrical poems, but then broken in a way you can't really tell. And she hides the rhymes a lot very often too. And here she uses these, which would seem unusual line breaks, to really emphasize without emphasis, without like using italics or anything, the right words. So we do know, because there's that break, you sort of have to emphasize that a little more. We do know this is the Niagara River, but it is hard to remember what that means. And then finally, with the very end, you're completely into the metaphor and know that that's what she's really talking about, is life and death. So, a beautiful poem. Yeah, beautiful short poem by Kay Ryan. Of course, Poet Laureate at some point, does it say one over here on the side? Poet Laureate, I don't know. She was like the 80s, like late, not 80s, 2008 or so, something like that. Anyway, that was Kay Ryan with Niagara River, courtesy of poets.org, which has a great archive, of course, of poems and poets. Okay, so now let's take a dive after that. I hope that was an interesting little analysis of two nice poems. Yeah. Anyway, I hope that was a useful little lesson as we take the first 15 minutes. I like to do that when we do these quick poems because, a lot of these poems, well, we'll see what we have here. Now, the first poet we're going to look at today, and these poems are coming from, let's see, this is February 27th, 2023, so about 11 months old. We're trying to catch up on as many as we can, and we're going to try to move quickly. If we can. I say it every time, but if I say it enough, maybe I'll actually do it. So the poet is Sheetal Nayar, and the poem is "Hold Tight," even though it's not written in the title. The text is pasted in. Here we go. Hold tight. Here we go. Hold tight, and there's no questions either in the little question form. If you'd like to submit your poems for critique, I should say, I forgot about that aspect. All you have to do is go to rattle.com, click on the critique link up in the header. There's a content tab. Critiques are somewhere on there, or rattle.com/critique. You can find it that way too. And just submit 2 poems if you can. It's really helpful to have 2 to look at. And we'll look at them either through a quick round, or if there's more to talk about, we'll dedicate a whole half show to it. Anyway, here we go. Hold tight. Sunlight gleaming through the windows, shining brightly on her face. I had surely seen better days. Yet another dismal morning, happier days I miss. Hold tight, I told her. Together we will get through this. Trying hard to not shed a tear, though all I could see in her eyes was fear. Fear of leaving all that she had, fear of starting something new. Hold tight, I told her. After all, it's not so bad. Wiping tears and resting her head on my shoulder. Is it me? Or is it me, I wonder? Or did summers in July just get colder? Painfully taking small steps forward and not looking back at all that we lost. Hold tight, I told her. This is merely a small cost. My own tears left unwiped. I take it in good stride. She needs me more than ever. Hold tight, I told her. We will always remain by her side. And so that is the poem, Hold Tight. And so the title, repeats throughout the poem a few times. And for this poem, I would just say it feels very personal. We aren't told what the story is. Hold tight, I told her. Together we will get through this. We don't know what it is. Like, there's not a lot of detail. It's a very vague type poem that feels kind of, we talk about this sometimes, but there are personal poems and there are public poems. And a public poem has to be self-contained. It has to include all the information that we need, even if it's a reference to something that we can look up ourselves and find out what you're actually talking about. There needs to be a way to access all the content we need to feel along with the poem. Because poems, you have to remember, are they're little empathy machines. That's what they are. We get to feel. We get to go along riding on somebody else's breath. That's what a poem really is. So we get to feel what they feel. But to do that, we have to know what's really going on. And when you have these kind of vague poems that are sort of private and don't reveal what they're actually talking about, we don't know who the her is that we're talking about. We don't know what the problem is. We get some maybe hints at it, but they're so vague that we can't really feel anything. So details is always such an important thing. With housing, buying houses, location. Well, in poems, it's detail. We need concrete details. We need to know the who, what, why, where, and when. We need to know what's going on in the poem so that we can engage with it and feel connected to it. And so this poem, has, it's just too vague to really connect with. Even though you can feel that there's an emotional sort of journey going on in there, it's too distant. So look at other poems, how other poets do, read more contemporary poems and see how people use concrete details to build a whole story. We need the story, and we don't get the story here. And as another poet says too, it feels like it wants to be a villanelle. I like that comment a lot. There is this repetition. If you look at a villanelle, the prompt poem of the week is to write a villanelle. So if you want to watch the Rattlecast, you'll see a lot of villanelles written on the open lines, or not the prompt lines. But a villanelle is a French form. They're all a bunch of French forms. In French, it's syllabic, so we can maybe do a sort of a metered if we want type form. But there's a repetition, there's a refrain, and a specific rhyme scheme, and that helps build poems through. And so we can see how that works. It's a great suggestion. But we need to know what's going on. Sometimes you can say it with a title. It's Hold Tight. Doesn't really tell us anything. You can tell us the situation with a title. That gets a lot out of the way. But a lot of more concrete images. are really important so that we can actually see, sunlight gleaming through the windows, shining brightly on her face. What kind of windows? What does her face look like? Like some detail. Everything is very vague, and so we can't really resolve a picture. Like if you look at even a simple poem, let's look back at Niagara River. We're positioning our tables and chairs upon it, eat and have a conversation. So you can imagine moving these chairs around, and then you start to get a scene even with that little tiny detail. See that concrete detail of positioning our tables and chairs. If the poem didn't have that, as though the river were a floor, we eat and have conversation. It's the positioning of the tables and chairs that helps bring that scene to life. And it's that concrete detail. These little sprinkled in details are the things that make the poem come to life so that we can enter them and then be moved by them. Okay, so anyway, hold tight. So more details and look up the villanelle form. I think, the rhyme here, I love rhyming poems. It's nice to stick to a fixed form that can really help guide your writing and propel you into surprising different directions, help those details emerge. And I think, true. Gary Rosson says, I don't think there's anything wrong with a mood poem. Find me a mood poem that works, Gary, that doesn't have concrete details somewhere. If it's painting a mood, it's going to be painting a mood by creating a space that we can enter. Even if it's abstract and floating around dreamlike images that we can't quite connect, it still works. And having, it's the difference between just an adjective saying, it's show don't tell. You can say you feel sad, and that's describing it with a word. But that's how poems like these work, unless they have concrete details that can actually build a scene and do something. So, So anyway, they don't convey the mood is the problem, unless you actually get to that space where a scene is being created, where something is that you can hold on to and interact with and enter. That's really the thing. You have to lose yourself, and you can't when the poem is too vague to feel like it's a really real space you're entering. But if you can think of a mood poem that is all vague, I'd love to see it. The poems, I think Niagara River, I pulled that out. I pulled back because that's the kind of poem that's so simple and not really detailed in that way, but it still drops these tiny small details in that are unique and interesting. I think there's only two. There's the moving the tables and the chairs, and there's the dining room paintings being replaced. But those things are so specific, and you can sort of feel them. You can hear the sound of chairs being dragged across a floor, because we already mentioned floor too. And so there's all that sort of swirling around, the feel of it moving a chair, because we've all moved chairs. That's all contained within that one little line. And then the painting is being replaced. You can imagine people, to me, a whole scene emerges of, people coming in and actually moving and changing the paintings as you're eating dinner. And it's with that tiny little detail. It doesn't have to be much, but still that blossoms out of that. Okay, well, let's move on to the next poem. So that's it. So more details, and look up a villanelle. I think a villanelle will be a form. Given the rhyme scheme that's already here, it's a little inconsistent, but there in rhymes great. Look up a villanelle. Try to make it a villanelle too. So add some more specific details. Let us know what's actually going on, and try to make it a villanelle. I think that'd be interesting. Okay. Next up, let's go to, how was I for that? I was about 7 minutes on that poem. That's not bad. Okay. Let me just assign it there, and let's go to the next. I think we have two poems in the next one. Yeah, we have two. And this is, the poet is Excel Carlo de Golacion. And this poem is Oh Fiona, Where's Your Heart? Did we read this one before? Sometimes I forget to mark them. Oh Fiona, Where's Your Heart? Maybe not. Maybe it's just reminding something. Anyway, here it is. Oh, Fiona, where's your heart? Oh, Fiona, if we already read this, somebody tell me. But, oh, Fiona, where is your heart? Oh, Fiona, you begged to be throned. You are the king's little pea, his incumbent power. Never the last hurrah. We casted you in and up. You were an adamant fist, yet a mirror of your father, another heartless dynasty. The bourgeoisie was fooled again. Silly that we believed again in reworn, sworn oaths and red letters and envelopes. Oh, Fiona, where is your heart? Where are your people? We are your people. We are your kin, but we never have your heart. Yeah, that's right. I think we did, but I think maybe Yeah, this is weird. I think maybe it was resubmitted because I don't think it was last week. Yeah. And we did this one too, the teachers. Maybe this was a revision based on our suggestions. I mean, it'd be helpful if he said, but he doesn't say that. I think we're just going to skip it because I think... Yeah, I think we did. Okay, I think we did both these poems already. So I think I'll have to try to find out where we did that and let the author know. I must have not labeled it because I go through and label these and then reply right after the show when we do it this way. I must have forgotten one. Okay, let's go to the next poem then. And the next poet is... Let's see. I shouldn't open that page. Sorry. There we go. A Moment of Compassion. A Moment of Compassion. Let me check this. Why is it not? It's supposed to be opening to the poem. Anyway, I have to be a little more careful. A Moment of Compassion. And the poet this time is Isabella Clarke from Oregon. This was on March 13th. So we're kind of catching up a little bit. March 13th. Not terrible, right? A Moment of Compassion. Save your face before I puncture white sunken cheeks with needles. Thousands and thousands of sewing needles playing Connect Four with your pores. You saw the village we created and needed it. Swiped it like a new child takes the mother's love. The shining apple, please soak up your time under the spotlight and pray nothing goes wrong. Sip on your nick and pacify yourself with the cobblestone I laid. Your face holds lies and miscarriages of swollen yesterday. For your sake and theirs, please take good care of the bells. You must ring them twice a day and keep them too entertained. I tiptoe, warn them with flashing lights and squealing brass horns and oracle. I will continue to refuse any battles or wars. I dropped open the drawbridge and welcomed you, knowing the usurping would immediately begin. I am no commander or craftsman or lover or friend, and you are a girl, wonderful. You do not know what you have stirred, and one day my name will be a sickness, taking your village faster than you could ever hear it. A Moment of Compassion. Okay. Well, let's see. So A Moment of Compassion. Let me look if I was trying to click on there. So let me see if there are any questions or notes. How do you cut down the poem while still getting your point across is the question. And it's a great question by Isabella Clarke. And now let's look back. So first of all, A Moment of Compassion. Is anybody resolving the poem yet for what it's really about? I think I'm going to have to read it line by line to sort of try to piece together. It's a little hard to follow. So A Moment of Compassion. The title right off the bat doesn't give us a whole lot to go on. Save your face before I puncture white sunken cheeks with needles. Thousands and thousands of sewing needles playing Connect Four with your pores. So what would that be about with your pores? And I think as Mary Picot says pores, I think it should be P-O-R-E-S, pores, and not the other pores. But you saw the village we created. So who is the you? I puncture. So who is your face, and why are you puncturing it with needles? I'm having trouble following that. You saw the village we created and needed it. Swiped it like a new child takes the mother's love. I mean, that line is nice on its own. There's a nice musicality to it, but I'm still having trouble resolving it. Yeah. Gary Rosson says the speaker has a speaker smallpox. Mary Keating, no idea what this is about. Tom Barlow says the title and the first line seem out of sync. Yeah, I'm really having trouble following. You saw the village we created. Wait, we saw that. The shining apple, please soak up your time under the spotlight and pray nothing goes wrong. Sip on your nick and pacify yourself with the cobblestone I laid. Your face holds lies and miscarriages of swollen yesterday. So, I mean, to me, given the pores and the sewing needles, is there some process for trying to get rid of acne? I mean, it's really hard to figure out. Yeah, Kate Dozer says there's a poem in here. My advice would be to write to it instead of around it. For your sake and theirs, please take good care of the bells. You must ring them twice a day. So again, who is the you and why are we ringing bells? I don't know what's going on. And keep them the two entertained. I tiptoe warned them with flashing lights and squealing brass horns, an oracle. I will continue to refuse any battles or wars. I dropped open the drawbridge and welcomed you, knowing that usurping would immediately begin. I am no commander or craftsman or lover or friend, and you are a girl. Wonderful. Mary Picot says this is an epidemic. Morgan Feeney says, what is a nick? And I'm not really sure what that is either. Sip on your nick? Is that a whiskey thing? Is that like a little... maybe not. My sort of interpretation, was it like a little bottle to sip from, but I think that's not true unless I'm not looking it up. Nick. I have no idea what that is either. So there's just a lot in this poem that I'm not really sure what I'm following. Another poet says Nick is nicotine. Okay. Sip on your nick and pacify yourself with a cobblestone I laid. Your face holds lies and miscarriages of swollen yesterday. So BC McC says Typhoid Mary. Yeah, Deb T says the voices in the first and second stanza sound very different, so I think two different speakers. Deb T says, oh yes, voodoo doll. I like that idea. Sharon Frontis is maybe a voodoo doll? So I don't know. So you can see how confused we are with the poem. And really, this just goes to show, how much clarity matters, and how much, like, we all want to know the story. We all feel that there's a poem in here, that there's something that matters, and there's no reason to hide it from your audience, from your readers. Having it clear what's going on, who the you is, what the story is, what the situation is. It's just basic storytelling is really important. It's not like, a poem isn't something where people are just wowed by flowery language and beautiful lines and descriptions that are great or anything like that. It's not that works. It's the storytelling. There's all kinds of poems and to do it all different ways, but it's always some kind of story. We always we evolve to hear and listen and care about each other's stories. And so we do. And we want to know what this poem is about. Every single person here wants to know what it's about, but we have no idea. We're really lost. And so just letting us know, telling us in a straightforward way, just works so well. And hiding things and being sort of mysterious, it's a tendency to go toward, but it's not a successful way. It's not something that really works. Poems aren't puzzles. They're a way of communicating. I think we need to have more clarity so we can follow along, because we want to. We really want to know what's going on. And so I think we just need more clarity for this one. Okay, let's go to another poem. And next up, we have the poet is Vanessa Whitney from New York. And the first poem is, the file is blank. Let's see if we have the other poem. Okay, we have one poem. The other file was blank. But this is Moving to the Beat. And there were no questions. So here you go for this poem. Moving to the Beats. Again, the poet is Vanessa Whitney. Here we go. Oops. I messed that up. Hang on. There we go. Moving to the Beats. When the beat drops, I started to move my feet, pop lock and dropping it, even Megan knees, if you know what I mean. Once I hear that shit, I stop everything to drop it, up and down and round like there's no one in the club but me around. As I'm on the dance floor, I think to myself I'm going to always love music, and the way I move about, I never need a soul to show me a good time, because I'm the life of the party, without needing clout, but y'all attention seekers know what I'm talking about. So, yeah. So this poem is interesting. Moving to the Beat. I really like the way it starts. So we know, again, comparing this to the last couple poems, we know what's going on here. And because we know what's going on here, we can ride along with it. We can go on the journey because we sort of know, you can't step into like a boat unless you know that it's actually a boat. And we know what's going on. So moving to the beat. When the beat drops, I started to move my feet, pop lock and dropping it, even Megan knees, if you know what I mean. I like that. I don't know what you mean, but I don't care. It's fun. It's a fun detail. Once I hear, and I don't know why, I would really be careful, to make sure that the punctuation is consistent, because it makes it look like you just don't care when things are not spelled. The I'm needs an apostrophe. This I needs to be capitalized. So definitely proofread. I don't think that's intentional because it's not consistent. Yeah. Yeah, as Mary Picot says, perhaps I move my feet is quicker than I started to move. Yeah. Gary Russin says, a modern gotta dance. Yeah. So, and BCMXC says, common language to describe the dance experience, find new words and phrases to describe the experience. I think, I know to me, I think it's okay as far as the description goes, because we kind of feel it. And I think it's working. When the beat drops, I start to move my feet, pop lock, and dropping it, even Megan knees, if you know what I mean. That, if you know what I mean, is nice. With a mean, the knees rhyming with mean, that slant rhyme that's close, feels nice. Once I hear that shit, I stop everything to drop it up and down and round, up and down, round and round, like there's no one in the club but me around as I'm on the dance floor. There's sort of a nice run-on rhythm to it that I think works. As I'm on the dance floor, I think to myself, and then we shift gears though here. And again, I think, definitely proofread that. But we shift gears. I'm going to always love music. So that is a turn, if we're talking about turns in a poem. And the way I move about, I never need a soul to show me a good time. Because I'm the life of the party. And here, so we shift. I think it's good to have a shift. We were talking about turns, talking about how a poem needs to go somewhere. And because of that line, the poem does go somewhere. But I think to me, the rhythm, even though as B.C. McC pointed out, that the language isn't all that original, there's a rhythm to it that felt dance-like that I think worked pretty well. And it wasn't something that you really need something, really complicated to explain. So I think the rhythm of that propels it, but then it loses some of that energy with the transition. I'm going to always love music, the way I move about. So I'm going to always love music. The always feels a little clunky with the rhythm. It's a really, breakdown of that. The register changes a little bit. And the way I move about doesn't really add anything either. So we have a pretty empty stanza there. I never need a soul to show me a good time. Wouldn't it be another soul? To show me a good time, because I'm the life of the party. Yeah. So Mary Picot says, I'm going to always love music, takes me to the future and takes me out of the poem. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So it's a reflective perspective. It's a shift in perspective that's reflective in a way that like suddenly, shoots you out of that rhythm that was making the poem kind of move and dance a little bit. And so how can you transition that in a way that feels like you're still dancing, maybe is the question, to make this poem work a little more strongly. Anyway, I never need a soul to show me a good time, because I'm the life of the party without needing clout, but y'all attention seekers know what I'm talking about. And I do really like this last line, without needing clout, but y'all attention seekers know what I'm talking about. And it's almost an ironic twist there. Is the speaker, calling herself an attention seeker, and everything that we've been told up to this point is false, because I'm really just looking for attention, even though, I don't need another soul. But obviously, you do need another soul, because you need people to be giving you attention if you're an attention seeker. I think it's a really clever structure to the poem too. So there's a lot to like in this poem. I think the things, yeah. So as B.C. McC said, I think we could find a way to describe the dancing in a little more unique and interesting way, and then to make the shift not change the sound as much, I think would really help. Morgan Feeney says it's just a shift in register too much. I think I'm always gonna love music, or something like that would feel better. That's a good point. Yeah, the formality of I'm going to always love music. Whereas it would sound so much better, I'm always going to love music. So great point, Morgan. I think maybe that's a big part of it too. Um, and then because I'm the life of the party is a cliche. And the problem with cliches is that we don't feel a lot because it's already sort of this chunked unit of understanding. And so we don't have a kind of, emotional response to it. It's just like, okay, there, the life of the party again. It's something we've already heard, so it's not stimulating our brains and making us really connect with the poem. And that's the problem with cliches, and that's why, so avoid that if you can. Like, find ways to write around that, make the language a little more fresh. But I really like the structure and what it's about. Mark Greener says it's too clever. Gag Chamber says the ending well done, so a little mixed feeling on that. I like the ending. I think it's clever and interesting. I just, freshen up the lines, and then also, of course, copy edit too. Mary Picot suggests Life of My Party instead to switch the cliche, which is one of the things you can do, is take the cliche, tweak it a little bit so you hear it fresh again for the first time. That's a good suggestion. Anyway, moving to the beat. That was a pretty interesting poem. Thanks for sharing that. And let me adjust this again. And the poet, that was Vanessa Whitney. Okay. Let's move to another poem. Thanks for sharing that, Vanessa. Let's go on. I really like to be so it's like all within like 2 months at the most. That'd be my goal. Let's see how over a year of doing this, maybe we can catch up to that point. Let's see. Yeah, good point. So Gary Rawson says tension between not needing a soul and life of the party in the same stanzas. Yeah, there's something interesting, really interesting there. Just making it a little more fresh in the way it's described would really help. This is Partha Sarkar, and the poem is The Groundless Cattle. So here you go, The Groundless Cattle. And no questions, Partha Sarkar, the poet, The Groundless Cattle. How many of them? Millions, the countless number should be asked rather than how they pass the bootless seconds of bootless priority. Let us know it. Have you heard their heartbeats? How are they? The tower does not open the rotten parchment, and the prime number has been silent since it was coined. So let the cattle go to the ground, groundless, and the conscience, I am going. So here, I mean, the poem, I'm hard to follow again. And you can see in all these poems, many of these poems so far, the last one being the exception, how clarity is important. If you look at poems that really move people, we know what's going on. And having it be, opaque and obscure and difficult to follow makes it really hard to connect with a poem. And I think there's some interesting lines and images here, but I just don't know how to put them together. The groundless cattle. Groundless. I mean, it's such an interesting word. Yeah, so another poet says confused. Groundless cattle. I just don't know what that means. How many of them? Millions. So I could see millions. Are they flying in the air? The countless number should be asked. Tom Barlow says, I'd like to know if this is set in India where cattle are not grown for meat. Submittal does this goofy thing where they don't tell you, they tell you the state or the province, but not the country. So I can look up to see if it's India or not, but, and you have to download, it's, northern India. Yeah. And West Bengal. Okay. So anyway, that's where the poet is. But still, does that help us resolve what's actually going on? Yeah. Morgan Phoenix says, almost like tarot or something mystical when it comes to the tower and the parchment. Maybe we need a bit more of a seer if we should be thinking in that direction. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. How many millions? The countless number should be asked. But what are they doing? Are we talking about like cattle farming for meat? In that kind of, is it like a vegetarian, vegan argument? Is it something else? I just don't know. Rather than how they pass the bootless seconds of bootless priority. That's a really interesting phrase. Groundless cattle is really interesting. Bootless seconds of bootless priority is really interesting, but I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what they actually mean. Let us know it, and I don't know it. Have you heard their heartbeats? How are they? The tower does not open the rotten parchment. Again, that's a really interesting phrase, but I don't know where to put it. It's like I have all these little interesting things, and I don't know how to build them into an object. Like you got like a Lego kit or something, and the pieces are all wrong, or an IKEA chair, and and you get like half the pieces are wrong. And you're like, how do these fit together? I don't really know. Or you don't have the instructions. Maybe that's a better metaphor. But there's no instructions, just all these pieces, and I don't really know how they fit together. Because we go to the tower does not open the rotten parchment, and then the prime number has been silent since it was coined. I don't know what we're going to, from tower to boots to prime numbers. So let the cattle go to the ground, groundless, and the conscience I am going. Yeah. Morgan Fee says maybe instead of the vague pronoun in the first line, change them to groundless cattle. And you can do something more interesting with the title. Give us more guidance to what the poem is about. Yeah, that's a good suggestion there. So how many of the groundless cattle? Millions? And then there you free up the title, and you can tell us what's going on with the title. That can help. But really, you can see, and this is the case, with a lot of poems that are submitted, that you probably, half the poems that are submitted in regular submissions, not just for critique, it's just really hard to follow what's going on. And clarity is just so important. If you can tell me a story, any kind of story about your life is interesting. Like everything is interesting, and we just need to actually hear it. And I think so often we get lost in the sort of the feeling of poetry and the sort of the sweeps of language, and we forget that we're have to tell us and communicate something. And I think, so it's just, and that just happens so much. So clarity, like let us know what's happening. Again, that's just the theme. A lot of times when we do these quick looks through the submissions that I haven't pulled out ahead of time, that's the case. And that's the case with probably half the submissions, is that you don't know what's going on. And so you can't feel or connect with anything. And it feels intentional. Because if we were to have a conversation with Partha about this topic, it would be fascinating, I'm sure. But we aren't given that information. It's not that there's nothing there. It's that it's not revealed. What is there? And it's kind of a frustrating experience because I'd love to hear about it. Okay. Let's go on to another poet. Hopefully the pace is a little better this week. Getting through 6+. Okay. Ladders to Heaven is next. This is Larry Kavani. And I just want some educated objectivity. So Ladders to Heaven is the poem. And let's see what we have here. Ladders to Heaven. Built with pine, mud, nails, marshmallows, shit, blood. Levels me, trying, hands grabbing air, propped up against gravity. Fool's song, sculpture for nothing's sake. Well, that's interesting, actually. So see how much we get in this poem, just compared to other poems. We had the dance poem, we knew what the dancing was, so we got to feel something. Here we know it's Ladders to Heaven. So we're already, there's a whole context that surrounds that we're given by giving it a title that tells us kind of what it's about. Yeah. So here, Ladders to Heaven. So we know we're building a ladder to heaven, built with, and then pine, mud, nails, marshmallow, shit, blood. So there's this list of what's going on. Levels, trying, my hands grabbing air, propped up against gravity, fool's song, sculpture for nothing's sake. I really like this. I really like how it ends. Sculpture for nothing's sake. It's a turn there, too. And, poems have to have a sense of movement like we talked about. Mary Picot says, is this a concrete poem? Looks like a ladder, and it does. And I wonder if maybe you could heighten that a little bit more and make it even more ladder-like by having, even more even spacing between the lines even. But it's a nice, short, quick poem. I think if we're going to look, how can we make the poem even stronger? There's so many poems. There are a lot of poets that are really good at really short poems. We looked at one already with Kay Ryan, who does a more musical one. Wendy Vitalock is even more musical. as far as rhyme and meter than Kay. And then Mike White is the one I always pull up for short poems because he's great at writing short poems. And what they all have is they still have a lot of interesting details within those poems. And so how can we, make the poem even more interesting for what it's doing, I think. Brandon Sullivan says there's a lot with a little. Actually amazing that it says so much with all those 1 and 2 word lines. It's true. I really like that aspect of this poem a lot. Yeah. Tambella says the plural ladders in the title might work better as a single ladder to fit the concrete poem. Yeah. Guy Chambers says, like the style of this poem. Deb T, what do y'all think of the lines levels me trying? Yeah, I think the poem is weaker. I like the my favorite parts. I like the built with and then this list, that list feel where it's like bam, 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 like your rungs of a ladder. And then I really like the end, sculpture for nothing's sake, and the way those draw out. I'd maybe consider having 1 word per line, and trying to keep it with this list feel. And maybe try to find a way to move off of the built with in a way that still feels sort of similar. But to me, the middle lines, levels me, is a little too abstract for the situation that's being set up. Another poet that does really, concrete minimalism is sort of made famous by Aram Saroyan. I'm trying to think if there's a Aram Saroyan poem that really fits this kind of concept well. Let me see if anything pops up. I mean, his famous one is the 1 word poem Light. Maybe if I look up images, actually. So I'm just trying to find something that might work. I mean, he has a lot of poems that are just 1 word. Well, this is one from Poetry Magazine. Here's a super, super tiny one. And I don't know if this is a great example, but this is one of 9. I wish I could see the whole 9. Sky every day. Actually, let me see if I can find, because isn't there a way? Hang on one second. Let me look around. Because see how the way there's just 3 words, sky every day. I can really feel this poem doing more of that and being stronger by just having that 1 line and feel like a ladder. Like, what if it was 1 word with a space between every line and we're sort of climbing up, built with, and then the details that we had here. Let me look up though. I want to see if I can find all 9 of these poems if I do it a different way. Sorry for the. There we go. Yeah, that's what I want to do. So if I go like this, and then get rid of that. Oh no, I closed the wrong one. Hang on a second. Just bear with me. Oh, there's the page. Okay. So we have this. There we go. So there's Sky Every Day. The next poem. These are all courtesy. Dish of Irish Setters. I Crazy. What else we got? Room Now, Door Humphrey Bogart. Pain Champ. So these are all separate poems, I should say. But look at this. Pain Champ instead of champagne. He was doing a lot of this playing with it. And I had he was a professor of mine actually at USC for a while. Jungle. And he's got the words here. Car swerves, injures 11, driver held. That's probably it. Oh, there's more. Seek air, tragedy bodies. Wind oil to blows out sea. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, the point is, if you look at a concrete minimalism, I think that's the style that's really working well in this poem. And I think that I would heighten that a little bit by, like I said, built with pine mud nails. Keep it like a list and let the whole story emerge as a sort of list. Let the list merge out into that end, which is really great. I really love Sculpture for Nothing's Sake. And I love the sort of stiltedness of that no apostrophe S, nothing's sake. I don't know, there's something hard to articulate about that I think is really great. I think that part of the poem is really brilliant. And I like Fool's Song. Maybe just without the S. Maybe keep everything singular for some reason. I don't know. I'd have a lot of fun playing with this poem, to be honest. And I think that there could be a lot more. But the thing that doesn't work, and what I wanted to really highlight, because it doesn't work, is this where it becomes more of a sentence with the grabbing, trying. Levels me is sort of too much. You know, where it's working is these like blunt little statements or little words that are building up into something. The levels me becomes it's sort of a whole argument where it doesn't really fit within the poem. And then trying hands grabbing air. That whole sense of movement doesn't fit with like these sort of blocks that the rest of the poem that's really working uses. So I would say, stick to the pine, mud, nails, marshmallows shit. I would just have each on a line, and find your way working into Fool's Song, Sculpture for Nothing's Sake. I really like that. I love that poem a lot, actually. I think it's really neat, and there's a deeper message to it too. Of course, the idea that a letter to heaven is a sculpture for nothing's sake is kind of a brilliant metaphor with a lot of ways to think about it. So I really love that aspect of this poem. So interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Again, the poet was Larry Cavaney. So thanks for sharing that, Larry. And yeah, interesting to hear what you might do with a, Sharon Ferrante suggests just levels trying. I think levels trying, the trying introduces a whole different sort of shape to the poem. Because we have to start imagining it being built in a way that doesn't really fit with the rest, I think. Let's see. Yeah. But levels trying, I think you could get away with doing that. The hands grabbing after levels trying is sort of too similar to, and sort of pulls me out of the poem. But I don't know. I think it's something to play with more and see what you can build up to keep it sort of feeling like every line is another rung that you're grabbing, even when you're grabbing air. I think you could do a little bit more to make it really come to life, but I really like it a lot. Okay. Tom Barlow says I like a shorter word than marshmallows, which is a good point. I mean, marshmallows is so different, but it's sort of a, there's a way that pulls off the list too, that it's nice to play with too with a list poem. Yeah. Hey, Mark Grinner says keep on working on poems in the style you have, something here to work with. Yeah, definitely. Totally agree. Okay, let's move on to one more before we wrap it up. And then the last poet for today will be... another from Larry. Okay, Hank's Bow Tie. Let's look at another one. So we have this similar sort of blunt, quick style as we did last time. This is After Michelle. Here we go, screen view. After Michelle. After Michelle. After Michelle left, Hank still wore the bow tie she gifted him. After Michelle left, Hank sat in silence listening to a ringing in his head. After Michelle left, Hank drank, slept, walked into the desert. 40 days, 40 nights. After Michelle left, Hank found a cat, named him Hammer. After Michelle left, Hank called his two friends. After Michelle left, Hank could still hear her song from a distance. I think that's really pretty lovely, too. I really like the style, this minimalism that you're working with, Larry. And I think a few things I'd play with here, but I like the quickness of it, the concision, the fact that the storytelling, where we know what's going on, it's the antidote to the previous poems what lacked clarity. It has a lot of clarity in this poem too, and I like the repetition, the way it lays itself out to the end, which is a really great ending. Hank could still hear her song from a distance. One thing, the After Michelle title, feels a little sort of, I don't know, boring or something, given that we have that repetition. It's sort of just repeating the repetition, which doesn't add a whole lot. So I think maybe a more interesting title might help the poem a little bit. And I think, I don't know why these lines at the beginning are a lot longer than the lines here. I think maybe, you know, playing with line length is going to be something that helps a lot. I think maybe just re-breaking, maybe what this poem can do is just sort of shaping it a little bit to make it feel more uniform. And maybe we'll go ahead and do that. Why not? Let me put it in a document really quick so that we can do that. Hang on, just pulling up a doc. Okay. Oops. What is that? It drops the brakes. So yeah, here. Let's look at it here so we can edit it. So after Michelle, and I would change the title, I think, but we'll work on that in a second. I think maybe maybe like you keeping it choppy and sort of at a consistent rate is the thing to play with. And maybe like even that, like maybe play with like 3 words per line, because the choppiness really works. You know, I mean, notice how Kay Ryan, I mean, it's almost like it was set up, but Kay Ryan plays with the breaks like that. And I think the end to a ringing in his head feels too much. But what if we kept it around this length and let it be choppy in that way? And let it sort of roll out itself like that. And what if we, you know, so the poem just feels a little more consistent in its choppiness? And I think maybe like that might work better. Let's just read it like that and see how it looks or how it feels now. Maybe like that, something like that. So it just feels a little bit more shaped, like it's important. And we let that, Yeah, another option, which is, Katie Dozier says, also, I would just call it after Michelle, then start with Left Hank. That's another really great option too. What you don't want to do is repeat this here, because you lose a lot of the momentum that you might have building up. It's almost like, we were playing that Mario Kart with the kids not too long ago, and you could hold the gas pedal, but if you hold it too long, the car kind of stalls when the green light goes. And that kind of is how it feels when you repeat the title in the first line. It sort of feels like all the energy you had from being surprised is like sapped all of a sudden. And so if we don't think of a better title, a good way to do it would be, as Katie suggests, calling it after Michelle, and then doing it like that, and having it be the title, then like read into the poem. And let's read it this way. And it was just playing with it. We might want to tinker with it a little more, but there was this sort of rough staccato, sort of keeping you off balance type thing is the poems. Again, they're these blunt, sort of mostly Saxon type words that are really, you know, strong monosyllabic poems. And so having a poem that sort of forces that to be emphasized by being sort of off kilter, I think feels really nice. I think that was one of the things that was working well. So let's see how it reads if we do it like this, and we'll tweak a little more. After Michelle, left, Hank still wore the bow tie she gifted him. After Michelle left, Hank sat in silence, listening to a ringing in his head. After Michelle left, Hank drank, slept, walked into the desert 40 days, 40 nights. After Michelle left, Hank found a cat named him Hammer. After Michelle left, Hank called his 2 friends. After Michelle left, Hank could still hear her song from a distance. Yeah. Or maybe that's not quite choppy enough. Maybe I'd play with it more. And Mary King said first line should be, what if it was after Michelle left? Yeah, maybe we want that. And maybe we want, I don't know. This is the kind of thing I would play with. And what you're playing with is how sort of choppy it reads. And maybe we want the Michelle, after Michelle left, to be a whole line every time. Or maybe we don't. I don't know. This is the kind of thing where it's just playing with it to see how the rhythm works. But I think that's the only thing. It felt a little sort of sloppy in its composition at the beginning, both with the title repeating and with the way that there was an inconsistency in the way the lines felt. And so I just play with making it feel sort of a little more cohesive in the layout. Otherwise, though, I think the poem is really great. I'm sorry, I didn't hit the cough button. Hank still wore the bow tie she gifted him. Yeah, I like that better. So I think maybe shooting for that kind of rhythm, where it's like 3 words-ish or 3 syllables-ish, is a better way to go. After Michelle left, Hank sad in silence. Yeah, I'd probably do this. But this is just how I'd play. And you kind of the poem can find its form if you just read it out loud. Like maybe that. After Michelle left, Hank drank, slept, walked into the desert. Maybe like that. Maybe that skinny and blunt. After Michelle left, Hank found. I tripped over bought found every time, no matter how it's laid out. But maybe if we pulled the bought up. Does that help? A cat named him Hammer. I don't know. See, I just play with it like this, though. And I don't want to spend tons of time doing it, but you see what I'm kind of doing is just switching the lines around so they have a kind of consistent feel, and then reading it to see how it feels reading it until you find the right way that feels right. You just kind of go by feel, like you're sort of groping for the right shape. And I think that's really all that's missing in this poem besides the title. And I like it this way. After Michelle left, Hank still wore the bow tie she gifted him. Much better to start there. After Michelle left, Hank sat in silence, listening to a ringing in his head. After Michelle left, Hank drank, slept, walked into the desert, 40 days, 40 nights. After Michelle left, Hank bought. We had the comma above. I think if we're going to do that, we either need the break to be there or comma. Hank bought, found. Yeah, I guess you do. If you can do the bought, found if there's a break there. And if you have the looseness of not having a lot of punctuation. Hank bought found a cat, named him Hammer. After Michelle left, Hank called his 2 friends. After Michelle left, Hank could still hear her. I think maybe hear her song. Yeah. Hear her song from a distance. So maybe this is the form that I would do. But that was all that was missing in this poem. I think it worked really well. So good work. Thanks for sharing this, Larry. We're going to wrap it up with that. That's what I'd do with it. But continue to play with it and shape it. And look up concrete minimalist poets. It seems like that phase of Aram and his friends that were doing that in the 70s is something you might like. Mark Griner suggests stanza breaks before each after Michelle left. Yeah, we could do that too. That might help. Or it might not. It depends. I mean, it's the kind of thing where you can't really know how it works until you play with it, until you read it out loud, given the shape of the poem. Yeah. And then I think this has a period. I'd maybe not do periods, but allow yourself, well, yeah. If you can get away without using any punctuation, that's kind of nice. So maybe like that. I don't know. Eventually, you don't need, because we sort of established the rhythm, you don't need punctuation eventually, because you know that after Michelle left, Hanks did something. And so that comma sort of becomes implied over time. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, just be playing with this and try to get the right rhythm. Okay. Well, I'm just repeating myself, and it's close. I think the poem is close now. So good revision. Thanks, everybody, for the suggestions here. Mary King says I wouldn't break up the lines. And yeah, I don't know if I would either. I kind of go back and forth. I'd like here it kind of feels good, but then it sort of comes too fast. Maybe the thing to do, and I always just play with poems like this. When there's a poem and you're kind of like looking for the shape, you kind of play with the line breaks, see how they're different, and play with what if it was, just couplets, even though it has all this silence, all this white space. What if it was like that? And then you left, we have a lot more room to play with. So then you just read it like that. Michelle left. Hank still wore the bow tie she gifted him. After Michelle left, Hank sat in silence, listening to a ringing in his head. After Michelle left, Hank drank, slept, walked into the desert, 40 days, 40 nights. After Michelle left, I think I'd get rid of this comma. After Michelle, and just have no punctuation. That's what I'd go for. After Michelle left, Hank found a cat, named him Hammer. After Michelle left, Hank called his 2 friends. After Michelle left, Hank could still hear her song from a distance. I think that's probably what I do, is couplets, actually. Letting all that... What they do is add this whole white space of sort of silence around each line, which makes the starkness of those like hammer-like words hit even harder. So I think maybe this is how I'd go. So after Michelle left, Hank still wore the bow tie she gifted him. After Michelle left, Hank sat in silence listening to a ringing in his head. After Michelle left, Hank drank, slept, walked into the desert 40 days, 40 nights. After Michelle left, Hank found a cat, named him Hammer. After Michelle left, Hank called his 2 friends. After Michelle left, Hank could still hear her song from a distance. Yeah, I think that's it. I think I'd go with that. So that's a wrap. Let's cut it. But great session, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Jana Zibelman says drop from a distance is one suggestion. I kind of like from a distance too, and from a distance being on its own line after the couplets. To me, I really like that. Yeah, I'd keep the distance for sort of the sort of longing kind of feel that it comes with. Yeah. And 2, as Mary Keating says, that's good on couplets ending with a single line, what Hank is now, single. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there we go. That's that poem. So thanks for sharing that. Really like how it turned out. That one. Really 2 interesting poems, Larry. Thanks for sharing them. Let me just label that so I don't repeat it later. And now we're up to April 3rd, next time we do this, so that's good too. Made some progress, cut 2 months out of it. Thanks everybody for being here on the critique. It's been a lot of fun. I really love doing the critique. It's a great break in my day. Yeah. So, let's see. All right, we got everything covered. Yeah. So, let's see. This week's guest in the Rattlecast is going to be Diana Getch. And Diana is, she was the Rattle Poetry Prize winner, one of 2 we had the second year we did it, I believe, for In America. A wonderful chapbook about becoming trans in America. And she has a memoir out. This Body I Wore came out last year. She's also got some new poems we're going to share, plus poems from In America. The prompt for this week was to write a villanelle that starts with an epigram or an epigraph. I don't know what the difference between an epigram and an epigraph is. I kind of use them interchangeably in my head, but I think there maybe is a difference. I think it's an epigraph that we want. But it's to write a villanelle starting with an epigraph. It's one of the things, if you watched Tim Siebel's episode last week, Tim had a whole bunch of poems that started with epigraphs, and he writes a whole bunch of blues villanelles, he calls them. So the prompt would be interesting to write a blues villanelle, and then we'll have that, and we'll talk to Diana Getch. Rattlecast number 229, Monday, January 22nd, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.